ADHD is a chronic condition marked by persistent inattention, hyperactivity, and sometimes impulsivity. 5% of children have ADHD in America. It is more commonly diagnosed in boys. ADHD begins in childhood and often lasts until adulthood. It was previously believed that children would grow out of ADHD, but we now know this is not the case.
Although the specific causes of ADHD are unknown, the most common contributor is genetics. Other environmental factors include difficulties during pregnancy, prenatal exposure to tobacco or alcohol, premature delivery, or postnatal injury to the frontal areas. The National Institute of Mental Health did a study on the brains of children with ADHD who had never taken medication and children without ADHD. Those who were diagnosed with the disorder had differences in the size of their frontal lobes and cerebellums compared to those without. As they got older, the cerebellum in the ADHD children started to look more and more like that of those without ADHD. The cerebellum is related to coordination. This explains why the hyperactivity symptoms seem to disappear as children grow up. However, the frontal lobes in ADHD patients were still significantly smaller than those without the disorder. Children with ADHD tend to have 3 to 4% smaller brains than children without, and they often have a smaller cortex area, which controls thought and action. This is important in the frontal lobe because the frontal lobe handles impulse control, socialization, and judgment. A smaller frontal lobe causes inhibited executive functioning, and this causes a delay in recall, which is accessing facts stored in long-term memory, and it also inhibits activation, arousal, and effort, which means they have trouble getting started, paying attention, and completing their work. Other inhibited executive functions include
working memory, which means difficulties with holding facts in mind while manipulating information. Internalizing language, which uses self-talk to control one's behavior and direct future actions. Emotional regulation, such as tolerating frustration and thinking before acting or speaking. And lastly, they have trouble with organizing their thoughts and future plans.
Individuals with ADHD can either switch between tasks too much, leading to inattention, or they hyperfocus, meaning they can be extremely focused on the task at hand but are unable to switch between multiple tasks. This is an example of how a person with ADHD has gotten distracted from trying to take notes and then hyperfocused on how they write the letter E.
We interviewed a UMW student who was diagnosed with ADHD as an adolescent and is now taking medication to help her with her daily activities.
Before, I really couldn't, when I got home, I would do my homework, but I wouldn't really do my homework. Now I can sit down and be like, okay, I'm going to do this, but I feel like the medication that I'm on is really just focused on that. There was a drastic improvement in my grade because I wasn't doing very well, but once I started the medication, I was getting E's. Most of the time I get really tired, but then if I'm with friends or something, I just talk really fast, I don't pay attention, I fidget a lot, act really hyper. I feel like I'm slower when I don't take my medication because I have to stop and think about it, but that could also just be because I'm tired, or when I don't take my medication I tend to be tired.
Stimulants increase dopamine levels in the brain. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure, movement, and attention. By taking the stimulants, you are able to put a slow and steady amount of dopamine into the brain, which is similar to the way dopamine is naturally produced in the brain of someone without ADHD. I hope with this video we have taught you how the ADHD brain works and how it relates to neuroscience.